Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. Today I welcome Jeremy Nolen onto the front porch, someone that I've known through social media for quite a while. I'm getting to know him a little bit better through some recent conversations that we had, but I'm so excited that you've decided to come up here on the front porch, and I can't wait to get into this conversation. Jeremy, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Doug. Looking forward to it.
I always start all my episodes the same way just to give the audience a little bit of an idea about who we're getting to know today. So, Jeremy, tell me a little bit about where you grew up. What was your childhood like? What kind of things did you do? Were you into sports or music? And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up here in Reading, Pennsylvania. We actually moved here when I was probably about 4 years old. I don't know exactly. I was born in California, which is where my dad is from. We came here early 80s. I went to Muhlenberg from kindergarten all the way to high school. Growing up, I was pretty active. I played a lot of sports, basketball, baseball, soccer, you name it. I was also in Boy Scouts all the way up to Eagle Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. So with that, I was a lot of outdoorsy stuff, right? Camping, backpacking, was even where I learned a little bit of foraging, a lot of, wilderness survival courses. They tell you things you can eat, can't eat. Like that's when I first learned that you can eat sumac berries, that it's not poison sumac like everyone assumes. Like it's actually edible. So that was kind of cool. Um, Music also, like I play probably 10 musical instruments. Like I started trumpet really young, then I discovered guitar, and from there just, that was it for me. I just really loved music. My dad is a musician, so I like grew up with that, always having him around. He plays guitar. Um, Played in bands, like got started in punk bands. That was my big thing, and then got into the ska bands and played in a cover band and that sort of thing. So
Okay, so we know a little bit about sports background, a little bit of music background as well, but it doesn't touch on what is the majority of your life today. I looked you up on LinkedIn, and this is what it says: uh, web developer, travel writer, cookbook author, blogger, former chef. That's a lot to unpack.
I know, seriously.
So, I mean, one of the way that I know you now is the food aspect of where your life has
Right.
taken you. So, could we start with that? How did you get into what took you down the road to becoming or wanting to be a chef?
My dad's a chef, so when I grew up, he was a chef of the Sheraton Hotel here in Reading. I spent a lot of time visiting. Like my mom would take my sister and I, so I grew up in that food industry, just seeing like the backs of kitchens and stuff like that. It's always kind of intrigued me, but like my dad always told me not to be a chef. He's like, the hours are long, you work holidays and nights and weekends, and to be honest, I didn't really want to do it. So I ended up going to college, and I went to Penn State, and I was going to major in either history or computers. I wasn't sure. History was a big interest of mine, but I kind of realized, like, what am I going to do with it? I could be a teacher, but I didn't really want to be a teacher. But during college, I needed a job, right? So I started working in restaurants, and then on my summertime breaks, I would go work with my dad. And I just honestly kind of fell in love with the kitchen aspect because I have always enjoyed food. I've always enjoyed eating food, cooking a little bit at home. I grew up in the industry, just kind of felt really familiar, right? And natural. And, everything about it, I just really, really liked. I didn't even actually, even though I was doing it, I didn't even pursue it yet. I was still just doing it part time. And while I was in college, it wasn't until a couple years when I was done with college. I didn't graduate. Long story short, I left college because I was playing in a band. We got signed to a record label. We got really busy, and I didn't really have the time to finish college, so I left. That didn't work out, but then I transitioned into cooking because I just really enjoyed it.
So, how long were you like? How long have you been in the industry then, as far as in the back kitchen, actually prepping and cooking?
My first job, I was 13 years old. So I'm 46 now. So I was 33 years ago. It was just washing dishes. It was with my dad. He took me to work with him. That was kind of like my first taste of it, I guess. And it's kind of cool because you're washing dishes and like you can drink all the Coke, Sprite, whatever you want. So as a 13-year-old, it's awesome. And you get a little bit of money. So I was like able to buy comic books. So I thought it was really cool. Throughout high school, I also did some jobs catering and stuff. So overall, it's been over 30 years since I've done it as an actual chef, professional, like the title chef. If you know or not, in French just means boss, which well, they use it in German too.
Yeah, they
Chef,
do.
just
Yep.
means the boss, right? So as that, 25 years.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
I've often wondered this. I mean, I have some experience in the food industry, not anywhere near what you have, but for our listeners, I thought about this question first off, knowing that you had this chef background. What do all those cooking shows on TV that are out there get right, and what do they get wrong?
Oof, that's a tough one. There's so many different styles of cooking shows. So I used to love. There's a show called Great Chefs of the World, and
Oh, yeah, I know that
okay,
show.
yeah, that show is great because they would take you to these awesome restaurants all throughout the world. I think that is right. I think just seeing all those amazing restaurants and like you see the back of it and how the food is being prepared, I think that's really cool. Anthony Bourdain's shows where he traveled a lot were awesome. I really like that. As far as other shows, I think they got it right. Mario Batali. Now this it's like showing my age, I guess, right? Because of I don't even think his shows are on anymore. But Mario Batali had a show called Malta Mario where he cooked for like three people. They sat in front of a counter and he just cooked dishes and he handed them out. I thought that was great. More recently, in the last 15 years or so, they're like competitions, which I did on Food Network. I didn't love it. I think it's not really my favorite style. I when Chopped or maybe not Chopped, Top Chef first came out, I thought it was kind of interesting. I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. But now I think that's like all it is. It's just competition shows, and it's not my style. I like the more informative shows. I want to learn about food. I want to learn about places that I can travel to and eat, or something I can make at home. So that's what I would say.
With the explosion of like Food Network and all of these shows, and also all of the food content that's on Instagram and TikTok, how has all this changed the food industry from your perspective?
That's a tough one. I honestly, I think it's gotten better. I think that if almost like it's inspiring for a lot of cooks and chefs. Like I know when I was in Philadelphia, Instagram and Facebook were just starting, social media in general was just starting to get big, and especially in the cooking realm. So like now you see all these other chefs posting food. It's like inspiring. You're like, oh wow, that dish looks amazing. Like I want to make something like that. You discover new restaurants that way. Like I followed so many chefs from all over the country, and I would see their dishes and be like, all right, next time I'm in New York, I need to go to that restaurant. I think that has definitely helped. I don't really see a lot of negatives to it. I know some people might say like, and he's like, oh, now they have all these people on the TikTok or whatever that aren't even chefs, but who cares? They're making good food and they're exposing stuff like that to people. Well, why not? I think it's just gotten better and better, to be honest.
Yeah, I wonder. I've often thought about that because I love to cook. I mean, not professionally, but I cook. I do all the cooking. I love being a little bit adventurous in the kitchen too. And I think a lot of this stuff has taken down that. I think like when we were kids, and you had a different experience because you were actually back in these kitchens with your dad and all that. But chefs and cooking had this like it was almost like the Ivy Towers of academia, where only certain people were allowed back there, and especially
Yeah,
like certain kinds of cooking. French cooking is you have to leave it to the French to do that, or and I think a lot of that has gone away, especially recently, and a lot of
yeah,
the barriers have been run down. I would imagine that. I don't know if that means less people are going out to eat or not, but also like this concept of like being a foodie, like
right.
I don't know, like what's your take on that? If someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, I'm such a foodie," I mean, do you see that again as like that's a positive because it's pushing people to try things maybe they've never tried before. I think the American palate has become a lot more adventurous than it was 25, 30 years ago, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a positive thing. I think if someone comes up to me and like, oh, I'm such a foodie, like, what do you recommend or something like that? I mean, trust me, I've gotten these from friends of mine that I grew up with or like people I've known more recently. Like, what's the weirdest thing? I'm going to Philly. I want to have the most bizarre thing, like I think it's kind of cool that they are willing to make those, try the different dishes that are just kind of off the wall. I don't really see anything negative to it. I know some people might be like, "Oh, I hate the term foodie." Like, it's whatever. Like, if that's what you want to label yourself as, fine. But I think it's just a lot of people are discovering really awesome dishes and that they probably would not have previously, put it that way.
What can you give me one of the positives that has come out post COVID in the food industry? I think we lost a lot of restaurants through COVID and places closed and didn't reopen. But what are some positives you see post COVID in the food industry?
I would say more people are probably cooking at home because I think you were forced to at one point. So maybe people were discovering that. But being from the restaurant industry, sometimes it's hard because like I look at that like it was affected my industry a lot. A lot of friends of mine have lost restaurants and their livelihoods and all that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I suppose. But like I think a lot of people start cooking at home, but I think it also got smart chefs to like, all right, I'm gonna get on TikTok and whatever. And now those restaurants that did survive are thriving because now they got a lot more exposure. But I do think that cooking at home was probably a big one, discovering new foods because you go on if you literally they say there's a lot of different sides to TikTok or whatever, right? So if you get on the food side of things, like you can discover all sorts of crazy dishes from all over the place, and you could cook every day of your life and not even scratch the surface of what you see online. That looks really interesting to me, at least.
Yeah, that's crazy. One thing that you really play heavily on is German cuisine. And I do want to
Right.
talk to you about that because I think to the average person, um, when they think of cuisines around the world, German is usually not the first one that comes to mind, whether, French or Italian or even like today, the rise of sushi and Indian restaurants. But so let's show some love to German cuisine because both of us have a deep love for it. What's your connection to it first? Let's start there.
Um, through ancestry on both my parents' side, I've had it, so I've heard about it like growing up from them. Growing up here in Berks County, there's obviously the Pennsylvania Dutch influence, but there's also a lot of more recent German, and I mean recent meaning like post World War II recent. So there was a lot of Germans that came in the 50s, 60s, 70s to this area. Why they chose Berks County, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's that connection to the PA Dutch. I'm not really sure. But there was a lot of them here. So we have the German clubs, there was German restaurants and butcher shops. So I had all that growing up. We would go to the Oktoberfest that the Leader Kranz had. We'd go every year. There's a restaurant called the Alpenhof. We used to go there and eat stuff like that. So I just kind of like grew up in that culture, going to those things, and just kind of knew about my own heritage and ancestry as well. And it's just one of those things that you almost can't explain, like why it resonated more with me as someone who was born and raised in the United States. Like, I was born in the central coast of California. Like, I mean, there's not many Germans that live there, but we moved here, and it just kind of like part of all that growing up environment, I suppose, is might have something to do with it, and you don't even know why. Sometimes something just resonates with you. There's chefs that are a regular white American, don't know their ancestry, that fall in love with Mexican food, and then they embrace it and they just go whatever. I just happen to have some of that ancestry as well, but I just something about it just resonated with me. I don't know what it was. Just maybe it's just the growing up, going to Oktoberfest and seeing everyone in their lederhosen and dirndls and hearing the music, and it just I don't know. It's something that just kind of stuck with me. So
What do you say to somebody that says, "Oh, German cooking, it's just sauerkraut and sausages"?
read my cookbook because that's literally what the whole thing's about.
Well, let's talk about that. So, because
Yeah.
cookbook author was one of your titles on LinkedIn. So, tell
Right.
us about that book.
So that book came about after about a year of Brauhaus being open. We started doing a lot of specials. We were just experimenting with like more modern takes on German inspired cuisine. And I just coined that phrase new German cooking because I just needed something to like, I don't know, explain what we were doing basically. And probably a year after we started doing the specials, well, within the first couple of months of doing that, we were getting a lot of attention locally, like the food blogs in the area. And then Food and Wine magazine saw something. They reached out like, "Hey, we want to feature one of your recipes." And it just kind of like grew. Brauhaus was getting really busy, and then we got approached by a publishing agent who just said like, "Hey, do you ever think of doing a cookbook?" And like every chef, I was like, "Yeah, I don't even know where to start." And she's like, "Well, I'm an agent. Like, I can help you." I had no idea how the process would go, but she was confident that I had something really unique, not been done before in this country at least, and the popularity of myself and the restaurant, like I'd already been in all the major magazines, I've won awards, all that. She was like, I think we can get this done. And that's just kind of how it came about. She shopped, we had to write a proposal, which takes a while and stuff. And then she shopped it around and we got a cookbook deal. So then the process really start writing everything.
How do you write? I mean, I guess I was thinking about this too. I've read thousands, well, not thousands, but I've read a lot of cookbooks in my day. And you think it's just a recipe. Well, yeah, but that recipe has to be dead on when you're writing that. So, what's that process like? Writing a recipe for a cookbook, knowing that anybody could pull this book off the shelf, and you want them to replicate what you do.
Right. A lot of testing, a lot of like going and like writing it down. You make it, you taste it, and you're like, I think it could use a little more salt, or it's way too much spice. It's too spicy, stuff like that. There's a lot of like going over the dish many, many, many times until you get it right. Also asking people, hey, I got this recipe, like I'm pretty much done. Who wants to make it? And you'd be surprised. A lot of people are like, they'll do it for free. Now you can pay recipe testers, but I have so many friends in a big network that people are like, hey, I'll yeah, give me a recipe, I'll take it. I'll do it at home. So it's a lot of that. So
So,
it's kind
can
of
you?
cool.
And hopefully we'll get some sales. I'll put a link to your cookbook on in the show notes for sure. But give me one or two recipes from that cookbook that you really, really like.
Oh man, that's a tough one. There's 100 recipes, so there's a lot to choose from. Um, that's a tough one. I mean, the pretzels are great. Like they're German pretzels are different than American soft pretzels, so I would say that's one that like you gotta make the pretzel that's in that book. I think a lot the other part of it depends on my mood. Like right now it's summertime, so I have obotsta in the book. Like I'll make obotsta at home because I can like sit in my yard and have that and a pretzel and some other stuff. As far as like I'm thinking summer right now because it's summer, right? There's a paprikash dish, which I don't know if you're familiar with paprikash, but typically it's like stew, it's like braised. We took those flavors and marinated half chickens with it. So it's like heavily paprika, onion, and some spice and grilled them. So that's a kind of cool dish too. And then other ones, I think like our sausages, some of our sausage recipes are in there. If you're ambitious home cook and want to make bratwurst, there you go. That's in there. Um, yeah, other than that, I definitely couldn't pick a favorite. There's some that I don't think people would make. Like there's a recipe for head cheese in there and Fleischsalat. I don't
Oh,
think
Fleisch.
anyone's gonna make that, but it's still cool.
So, what do you? I kind of brushed this question, but I'd love to hear your take. So, somebody that does come up to you and say, "Oh man, it's just sauerkraut and sausage." How do you sell German cuisine to somebody that maybe's never really had real German cuisine or has no idea how many layers there is to German
Right.
food?
A lot of times I'll just tell them one is a big country. Like it's a big country in Europe. It's not small. It's not United States large, but it's a pretty big country that's pretty diverse. If you look at a map of it, there's the ocean borders part of it. So if you get further north, there's a lot more seafood that's lighter. You have the southwestern part that borders France, so there's a little French influence in that food, that wine region. Everyone thinks of Germany, they think of beer. Not many people think of wine, so I usually tell them that. I was like, look, is there sausage and sauerkraut heavily throughout the country? Yeah, of course, but they also eat a lot of other different things, and I would almost always steer them towards the fish aspect.
Yeah. Well, it's perfect transition because one of your newest endeavors, we're going to add another thing to your title here pretty soon, is you've started a new company called Savor Germany. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so my wife and I started this company, and what our aim is to bring people to Germany as hosts and show them uh, where we like to go, like what we like to eat, what we like to drink. And I think a lot of people sometimes because of the language barrier or just they've never been out of the country or something, they're kind of scared to go over. And I think we want to be able to show them like, hey, you can come with us, we're hosts, but also the culinary aspect. There's plenty of vacations you can take to Germany or Italy or France or whatever, but like as far as I know, there really isn't many, if any, culinary focused tours of Germany where you're going with two chefs, a chef and a pastry chef, and going to breweries and restaurants and farmers markets and cheese producers, a butcher shop, you name it, that sort of thing. So that's kind of our goal is to show people not necessarily a different side of Germany. Like I don't want anyone to take it wrong, and we're not trying to be that unique. Like we're going to go to some really awesome places, but just go with chefs. Like it's food and wine and beer focused. So that's our goal. And a lot of it is because like we're in the hospitality industry. Like we like pleasing people. Like it's just what we do. Like I've always enjoyed going somewhere with someone for the first time and then tasting something and be like, oh my God, that was amazing. Like that's the best burger I've ever had. That's the best, whatever I've ever had. Like it feels good. And that's kind of what you do as a chef. Like you make food so that people enjoy it. And I think it's kind of a perfect transition as I'm in my 40s now. I'm like, don't want to work all the nights and weekends in restaurant. It makes perfect sense to like do something like this because now I'm still like in the hospitality industry in a sense. Like I'm pleasing people. They're seeing all these great places and like we have a lot of connections to Germany. People live there now. People have been there. We've been there many times. So we're just trying to put it all together and take people on and I don't want to say epic, but pretty epic trips.
Yeah, no. Well, I know that like it's big. I know there's a lot of popularity right now among like these farm to table in Italy trips that you can take, and exactly like what you described. And I've seen them for France as well. And you're right. I mean, as the audience knows, I'm in Germany often, and I've never heard of anybody doing this from at least with Americans. So I think this idea is I think it's awesome. I know you and I have talked a little bit about this before this conversation, but it also to be able to show the average American that has that concept of, oh, it is just lederhosen, beer, and sauerkraut and yodeling to take them somewhere and show them, like you said, the wine region and or wine regions and just the various cultural influences in German cooking because you didn't mention too. I mean, there's Turkish influence in cooking because of the number of Turks that are living in Germany, and it's really unbelievable. So I just think it's. I really was excited when I heard you talking about this the first time because I really think that there's a desire out there for people to travel for sure, but I think a lot more people now are getting into a lot more people want to travel with a purpose instead of just let's go look at five castles and X. I think this idea that, and you had mentioned to me that hopefully in the future you'd love to be able to incorporate a day of the trip or maybe more where you are actually cooking with the people on the trip.
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So like we do want to take them to there's going to be a hustle involved. There's going to be something like that, but we also want it to be about being there with us on vacation with us. So we do like to go out to eat. We've been in the restaurant industry for a long time, so we like that. But we also like to cook. So we're actually going in the fall this year for a few weeks to just kind of like research these kind of things. We want to find an Airbnb or something like that where we have maybe a large enough kitchen to cook and invite like 10 people in with us, or even just cook outside. But we have to make those connections with people that rent out houses or like a villa or find a guest house or something like that where they allow us to do that. And it's going to require us being there and meeting people for sure. But that is a goal. Our first tour won't have that, but a goal will be to look, hey, we're going to go and I'm going to be making this awesome dish from this region of Germany or whatever. So
Yeah, I think it's just totally awesome. It's just this awesome concept, awesome idea. I wish you nothing but much success with all of this.
thanks. Yeah, I
I
look
just have
forward to it.
one last food related question for you before we kind of move to a different direction, and that is, it's kind of it's a philosophical question. I've often thought about it, but I want to hear your take on it as someone that's been in the industry your whole life. What power does food have?
I think it probably sounds so cliche, right? But brings people together. Like it really does. I mean, I can't tell you, you can meet someone from another culture and you might have like literally nothing in common with them. But if you both enjoy food, they more than likely will want to show you what like is typical in their hometown or their country or their culture, whatever, and you would probably want to do the same thing. If you don't like food, then I don't know, that's not going to happen. But I think that is one thing that like it does bring people together in so many ways. Like look at holidays, like it's not just in the United States. Most holidays revolve around food. Like well, I mean, there's the religious aspects of a lot of holidays, but you know what I'm saying. Like you don't have most holidays without having some kind of a food, whether it's a big dinner or a big buffet or a big feast over. So I think that definitely brings a lot of people together. Parties, like who has a party at their house that food's not there? Doesn't really happen. Like you have a Super Bowl party to watch the Super Bowl, like you have a spread of food or something. Like we'll have little barbecues at our house, right? Just like invite a bunch of people. Hey, we're gonna be cooking up a bunch of different, sausages and whatever. and you just invited people. It's, I think it definitely brings people together. And like I said, it might be cliche, but where does everyone hang out in a house in the kitchen, right?
Okay. One. I said that was going to be the last one, but I do have one more. So I work with high school students, and you know, cooking is something that comes up in conversation in our classes because we do talk about food and culture, and how important food, you know, what role food plays. But if a 14 or 15-year-old teenager comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'm really interested in becoming a chef someday," because they follow a bunch on TikTok or Instagram, what's your best advice to that young teenager?
I'm probably biased because I didn't go to school, but not to go to culinary school. Like skip culinary school. You don't need it. Like you start working in restaurants, you'll learn so much more. Like as a chef and someone who has hired hundreds of people in my career, I've never cared about a culinary school degree. Like it never mattered to me. Like it and I'm not speaking just for myself. Most chefs don't care. They're like they're not gonna look at your culinary degree like, okay, yeah, you're hired. Most of them don't care. Now, if you really want to do it, that's fine. I wouldn't stop you. But as far as like becoming a chef, you just need experience. Like you need, what do they say? To become an expert, you need 10,000 hours, right? That's what you need. You need a lot of time. You need cooking. And if you get in the right restaurants, you'll learn a lot. And the only other thing I would probably say, and it's probably because I did it myself, is growing up in a place like Berks County, if you want to be a high level, you have to leave. We just don't have the same type of thing as like New York or Philly or Chicago or Los Angeles or whatever. If you want to be a really high level chef like that, you have to go because one, it forces you to become better because you're surrounded by a lot of better cooks and chefs. And if you want to be good, you have to compete with them. You have to get a lot better. So that's probably the two things I would say. But just work, just start working in restaurants. It's so important.
And one last bit of advice to pick your brain. What do you say to the average home cook that is a reluctant cook, but they have to cook, you know? What's your best advice to somebody that is scared of going in the kitchen, scared of cooking? What do you tell that person?
Relax. Just I think like try to cook. I don't want to say intuitively because might not be intuitively when you don't know what you're doing, but kind of experiment a little bit. Like follow a recipe, but once you start to understand, how things taste, like follow a recipe exactly, but taste it before you serve it to your family or whatever, right? If it doesn't taste quite right, like you can change it. Like if you don't think it like this doesn't really taste like much, add some more salt to it. If you like, or whatever it happens to be. I used to talk to cooks about that a lot, and a lot of them will take that advice and be like, I really thought about what you said, and like I tasted it. I'm like, yeah, you know what? It does need more stuff, and I'm adding more of each of the more in the quantity of every ingredient that was in there, and now all of a sudden, like, well, it's so much better. So I'd say, experiment. Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah. All right, Jeremy, we're gonna totally change directions here. I close out every interview with 10 quick questions that I ask all my guests that have necessarily nothing to do with what we've talked about before, but just an opportunity to get to know my guests a little bit better. So, are you ready for your 10 quick questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right, here we go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Question number one. What is your morning drink of choice?
Coffee and water.
How do you take your coffee?
Currently, I use almond milk and make like a cappuccino type thing. We
Oh, there
have
you go.
a espresso type thing. Yeah,
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Nespresso. It's a Nespresso machine.
There we go. All right, question number two.
Yeah,
Who this might be tough for you to answer, but here we go. Who is a go-to musical artist or group for you?
that is a tough one, huh? Oh, it honestly really depends on my mood. Like I have a strong punk background in ska and reggae, but I would say those two genres for sure. So yeah, I don't know if I could choose an actual artist. Let's
Okay,
say
I'll
that.
I'll put you on the spot. Someone comes up to you and says ska music. What's that? And you have to give them one band to listen to introduce them to ska. Who is it?
Uh, New or old?
Your choice.
I'd probably say the Slackers because if depending on their age, they might like it more than original Jamaican ska.
Okay. Good
That's
choice.
what I would
I,
say.
I know the
Yeah,
Slackers well. Good choice. Good
yeah.
choice. All right. Question number three. What movie can you watch over and over again and it doesn't get old?
The original Star Wars trilogy.
Okay. Good, good, good. Hey, what's your favorite movie that deals with food or cooking? Do you have one?
Oh, honestly don't haven't really watched a lot of the classic ones that everyone talks about. Like I know the names, like Waiting and Chef was one maybe, but I've honestly I've never seen them.
Okay.
But one that has food prominently featured that is Goodfellas.
Okay. Oh
Like
yeah.
they always seem to be at restaurants or
Yeah, they
like
do.
the mom's house or something. So I'll say
There,
that.
there we go. All right. Number 4. What is the last thing that you read?
Oh man. Like an actual book or
Oh, it
just
could be anything, anything.
okay. Uh I mean as lame as it might sound, I don't want to say read from start to finish, but it was a cookbook. But the last book that I read, I'm currently reading now, and it's an old Dungeons and Dragons book, believe it or not, from the 80s.
There we go. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5. Ooh, what is your favorite pizza topping?
Oh man. American style pizzas, pepperoni.
Okay.
Like real, like maybe Italian style, probably like a good like margarita
Okay. Okay. Oh, they're good. Both of those are good answers. Yeah. Number 6, laying on the beach or going for a hike?
hike.
Okay. Number 7, here we go. This is the one I was most looking forward to. You have invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Ooh. Um, let's see. Etwas Deutsch, natürlich, ja. Rouladen, Spätzle,
Oh,
Wollkohl.
I'll be right over.
Yeah, that's
It's one of my favorites.
yeah, same
Oh,
here. That's why I picked it.
perfect. I love it. And what are we
Yeah, I love
drinking?
it.
What are we drinking?
Uh, with that, maybe like a German red wine, like Felder or
Oh,
something like that, or Augustina Lagerbier,
there we go.
because that's like the best German lager, in my opinion, and
Yeah.
it just came back to the United States after like 15 years. So
Yeah, I saw. I saw. Okay. Yeah, and
yeah,
it is good
so
beer.
good.
It is good beer.
Yeah,
That's a good meal, good beer. Listen. All right. Number 8. What is a dream vacation destination for you?
that I haven't been to.
Yeah, sure. Or a
Yeah.
place you want to go back to.
Well, I always say Germany, but I am going back there in 2 months, so I won't say that. Dream, hmm, probably somewhere in the Mediterranean. I've been to Spain and the Mediterranean, but I have not been to Mediterranean, Italy, or Greece, so I'd say there.
Yeah, those are good choices. Yeah. Number 9. What is something you're afraid of?
Wait, I gotta cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry. What is something you're afraid of?
Jeez, I don't know. I don't want to say heights because I'm not afraid of heights. I fly and I've flown a lot in my life. It's not that, but like if you stand on the edge of like a cliff when you're hiking, yeah, no thanks. That doesn't do it for me.
Okay, sounds good. All right, last question. What job, other than one that you've had, would you love to have?
Bob,
Yeah.
I think the one that we're trying to build with the tour, like I would love to, know, be take people to Germany and in Austria and Switzerland, even northern Italy, the
Yeah.
Germanic parts, and just take people around and show them like awesome restaurants and farmers markets and breweries and vineyards. And I think like I'd really enjoy that because I like talking to people and I've met a lot of people in my life and I like showing people exciting stuff. So I think I would really enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would. I know I would. I know I would. Jeremy, it's been an awesome
Yeah, for sure.
conversation with you.
Yeah,
I'll definitely
absolutely.
link your cookbook and is your new Savor Germany company already have a website presence? I'll look. If it is,
Yep,
I'll link that as well.
savorgermany.com. Yeah.
All right, perfect. I'll plug all your stuff, and I appreciate what you're doing. And when you were still working at your previous restaurant, that's kind of how I found you, seeing on social media some of the stuff you were
Right. Yeah.
creating. I was like, this is awesome from my perspective. So I just wanted to give you a shout out. Keep up the great work. Look forward to talk with you again in the near future. And thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Cool. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Your ratings and reviews will help others find the show. You can follow along on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. If you would like to financially support our endeavors, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. I thank you in advance for any contributions. Please feel free to tell all your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.